The market was already waking up when the boy walked in, moving slowly between the lines of stalls like someone trying not to be noticed. He was thin, almost too thin, a kind of thin that made people look away because it made them uncomfortable. His clothes were clean enough, but old and faded, and his shoes were worn down at the back, slapping the ground a little with each step. He held a small backpack close to his chest, as if he was afraid someone might try to take it from him. He kept his eyes low, not because he was shy, but because he had learned that looking people in the eye often made them suspicious. People were kinder when they thought you wanted nothing from them. But today he did want something, and the thought of it made his stomach twist. He had not eaten since yesterday morning, and the hunger made his head feel light, like he was floating a little above himself. The market was full of sounds voices calling out prices, the clatter of crates, the buzz of early shoppers. But the boy focused on something else, a small stand near the edge where an old upright piano stood. It was scratched and missing a bit of paint, and a few keys on the right side looked chipped. But it worked. He knew it worked. He had played it once. Only for a moment. Only when the vendor wasn't looking. He took a slow breath and walked toward it. His plan was simple. Ask to play. Ask if he could have something to eat in return. Nothing big. Maybe a small bowl of soup, or even a piece of bread. He wasn't picky. He only needed enough to push away the sharp, empty pain inside his stomach. The vendor, a large man with a friendly face that often wasn't so friendly, was arranging vegetables on the counter when the boy approached. The boy waited a second, giving the man time to notice him. "Sir?" the boy said quietly. The vendor glanced at him, frowned a little, then kept working. "What is it?" The boy swallowed. Can I play the piano for a little while?" "Only a few minutes." The man didn't even look up this time. "No playing. Customers complain." "I won't play loud," the boy said quickly. "I can play soft. Really soft. Doesn't matter. Not today." The boy nodded as if that answer made perfect sense, then backed away. He didn't argue. He had learned not to argue. People liked you better when you stayed quiet. He moved through the market again, walking past stalls with bright fruits and warm bread and steaming noodles. The food smells made his stomach ache more. He put a hand on it without thinking. He saw another stall with a piano smaller, even more beat up than the first, but it still had keys, still had strings, and that was enough. This time a woman stood behind the counter, filling small cups with fruit. She looked busy, but not unkind. The boy approached carefully. "Excuse me?" he said. She looked up with a quick smile. "Yes?" He pointed to the piano. "Can I play that? Just for a few minutes?" Her expression changed, still soft, but confused. "Why? You know how to play." "Yes," he said. I can. I promise I won't bother anyone." She studied him for a moment. "Why do you want to play?" He hesitated, unsure how much to say. I was hoping I could play in exchange for something small to eat. Maybe just one piece of fruit. Or anything, really." Her face tightened, not angry, but uncomfortable in the way people often were when faced with someone who needed something. She looked toward the piano, then back at him. "Look," she said gently, "I can't do that. If I give food to one person, more will come asking. Then I won't have anything left to sell. You understand?" The boy nodded again. "Yes, I understand." He backed away once more. Not angry, just disappointed. Disappointment was something he had grown used to. It didn't sting as much as it used to. He kept walking, moving through the market, like a shadow. People brushed past him without really seeing him. Someone bumped his shoulder hard enough to make him stumble, but the person didn't even turn around to apologize. The boy steadied himself and rubbed his arm. He kept going. He found a small open area where a few old chairs were set out for customers who wanted to sit and eat. A slow breeze carried the smell of grilled corn. He tried not to breathe too deeply, because it only made him feel weaker. He sat down for a moment, letting his legs rest. He tried to think of a new plan, but nothing came. He couldn't keep asking. People didn't want to be bothered. They didn't want to think about someone being hungry, but he also couldn't leave. Not until he tried at least one more time. He closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered a different piano, a shiny black one, in a room filled with sunlight. He remembered his mother sitting nearby, smiling softly as he practiced. She used to bring him sandwiches cut into neat little rectangles. He always ate them slowly so he could make them last. He opened his eyes again. The memory felt far away now. He stood up, took a breath, and walked toward another part of the market he hadn't checked yet. He didn't know if there would be another piano, but sometimes people left old ones around for decoration, even if they didn't work very well. He found one near a corner where a group of vendors sold handmade crafts. The piano looked like it had survived a long life, scratches, dents, a few missing pieces on the sides. But the bench was still there, and a few keys were pressed down like they were stuck. A group of teenagers stood nearby, laughing loudly at something on one of their phones. The boy didn't go too close to them. He had learned to avoid groups of teens. They were unpredictable. Instead, he looked for the owner of the stall. A thin, older man sat behind a table covered with carved wooden toys. He looked tired but not unkind. The boy approached slowly. "Sir?" he said. The man looked up. "Yes? Is that piano yours?" The boy asked. The man nodded. "It's old. Doesn't sound good anymore. Key stick. Why?" The boy took a breath. "Can I try playing it? Just for a few minutes?" The man seemed surprised by the question. He looked at the piano, then at the boy, then back at the piano again. "You want to play that?" the man asked. "Yes," the boy said. "If it still works." "Even a little." The man shrugged. "Go ahead. I don't mind." The boy felt a small wave of relief wash over him. It was only a small chance, but it was something. He walked toward the piano, ignoring the teens who were still laughing nearby. When he reached the bench, he sat down slowly, testing the seat to make sure it didn't wobble. He set his backpack beside him carefully. It held the only things he still owned, and he didn't want to risk anything falling out. He placed his hands on the keys. They were dusty and rough under his fingers. He pressed one lightly. It made a dull sound, but it was still a sound. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a breath. He tried a simple chord, soft and slow. A few notes stuck. One sounded flat, but some still rang the way they were supposed to. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. He started to play. Not loud, not fast. Just a gentle melody, simple and soft, the kind that felt warm even when life didn't nod at first. No one noticed. People kept walking, kept talking, kept working. But slowly, a few heads turned. A couple of shoppers paused. The vendor with the wooden toys tilted his head, listening. The boy kept playing, letting the music guide him. It felt strange and familiar, at the same time like meeting an old friend you hadn't seen in years. He didn't think about food or hunger or the long day behind him. For those few minutes, he only thought about the keys beneath his fingers and the small, trembling sound they made. But then the teens noticed him. "Hey," one of them said loudly. "Look at this." The boy didn't look up. He kept playing. "What are you doing?" Another teen asked, stepping closer. "You think you're some kind of musician or something?" The boy's fingers shook, but he didn't stop. One teen laughed. "Play something real. Not that boring stuff." A few people turned to look. But no one stepped in. The boy lowered the volume of his playing, keeping it soft, hoping they would lose interest. But they didn't. Single quotes T. Another teen leaned forward, trying to see his face. Hey, are you even good? Or just pretending? The boy's stomach twisted. His hunger mixed with nervousness until he felt almost sick. He didn't answer. He didn't trust his voice to stay steady. The teens laughed again. Come on, play something. Make it loud. The boy kept his eyes on the keys. He wanted to disappear, but he also didn't want to stop playing. The music was the only thing keeping him from breaking, and someone's voice cut through the noise. Leave him alone. It was the older vendor. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough strength to make the teens turn. What? One teen asked. I said leave him alone. He's not bothering you. The teens exchanged looks. They shrugged, muttered something under their breath, and stepped back. Losing interest. The boy let out a small breath he didn't realize he had been holding. His hands shook, but he kept playing, softer now. The vendor walked closer. You play well, he said quietly. The boy nodded once. Thank you. He didn't say anything else. He didn't say he was hungry. He didn't ask for food. He just played, letting the notes fill the air, even if they weren't perfect. For those few minutes, the market felt calmer. People slowed down as they passed. Some stopped for a moment to listen. Others simply smiled before moving on. The boy didn't know if anyone would help him today. He didn't know if he would get something to eat. But he knew one thing. He would keep trying. And no matter how many times people mocked him or turned him away, he would keep playing, because the music was the only thing he had left, and the only thing that kept him going. The boy stayed at the old piano longer than he meant to. His fingers moved slowly, almost shyly, across the keys, trying to pull out whatever sound the tired instrument still had left in it. The music came out soft and a little uneven, but it still carried something warm, something gentle. And for a little while, it helped him forget the heaviness in his stomach and the ache in his chest. When he finally stopped playing, the market noise slipped back in around him, the chatter, the laughter, the sounds of people living their normal day. He let his hands rest on his knees and stared at the keys. The vendor who had stepped in earlier was already back at his table, carving something small out of wood. The boy whispered a thank you toward him, even though the man didn't hear it. Then he stood up, picked up his small backpack, and stepped away from the piano. He didn't know where he was going next. He didn't have a plan. His life had become a long chain of moments where he simply tried to make it to the next hour without falling apart. As he walked through the market, he tried not to look at the food stalls again. The hunger was stronger now, almost dizzying. He felt like someone had scooped out everything inside him and left only emptiness. A group of children ran past him, laughing loudly. One of them bumped into him but kept running without looking back. He stumbled a little but caught himself. The world swayed for a second before settling. He needed to rest. He walked toward a quieter area near the back of the market, where there were a few empty crates stacked against a wall. He sat down on one of them and pulled his backpack onto his lap. He unzipped it slowly and checked the inside. There wasn't much. A thin blanket, a small notebook, a pencil that was almost too short to hold properly, and a folded photograph. He took the photo out gently, careful not to bend it. The picture was slightly faded around the edges from being handled so many times, but he could still see the details clearly. It showed him when he was younger, sitting at a bright piano in a sunny room. His mother stood behind him with her hands on his shoulders. She had a soft smile, the kind she used to wear when she listened to him play. He traced the edge of the photo with his thumb. He remembered that room clearly, the big window with light streaming in, the warm smell of the old wooden piano bench. The sound of his mother humming while she made lunch. Life used to feel simple. Life used to feel safe. Life used to feel full. He closed his eyes and let the memories wash over him. He remembered being small, barely tall enough to see the top of the piano. His mother would lift him onto the bench and say, "Try playing what you hear inside your heart." At first, he didn't understand what she meant. He would poke at the keys randomly, laughing at the strange sounds. But little by little, the sounds started to form patterns. Patterns became melodies. Melodies became songs. His mother would clap her hands and say, "See? I told you. You have music in you. You just have to let it out." As he grew older, she worked long hours, 2 jobs at once, so he could keep taking lessons. She saved every spare coin to pay for piano books, music sheets, small competitions. She always told him not to worry about money. She said, "This is for your future. One day the world will know your music." He believed her, but then everything changed. He remembered the day she became sick. It wasn't sudden, not at first. She just looked tired, more tired than usual. She said it was nothing, just exhaustion from work. She would smile and say, "I'm fine, don't fuss over me." But the sickness grew anyway. Soon she couldn't work. Then she couldn't walk without holding on to walls. Then she couldn't get out of bed. The boy didn't like thinking about the last part. The memory still felt too sharp, like touching broken glass. He remembered sitting beside her bed in the dim apartment, holding her hand. She squeezed it gently and whispered, "Promise me, you'll keep playing, no matter what happens. Don't let the world take your music away." He made the promise dot, and then she was gone. Everything after that happened too fast. Bills piled up. The apartment was taken back. He had no family nearby, no one to stay with. The little money he had saved ran out quickly. He slept wherever he could shelters, empty corners of buildings, bus stops when the nights weren't too cold. The piano had been the one thing he wanted to keep, but he couldn't. It was too big, too heavy, too expensive to move. He had to leave it behind. The memory burned in his chest. He opened his eyes again and looked at the market. People went about their day, unaware of the story behind the quiet boy sitting alone on a crate. His stomach growled loudly. He pressed a hand against it. He wasn't someone who asked for help easily. His mother had always taught him to work for what he needed, not beg for it. But playing the piano wasn't begging. It was offering something in return. Something he was good at. Something that still felt like a piece of his mother. He stood up slowly, slipping the photo back into his backpack. He zipped it up and slung it over his shoulder. He needed to keep trying. He walked back into the busy part of the market. His legs felt shaky, but he kept moving. He would try one more time. Maybe someone else would let him play. Maybe someone would hear something good in the music. Maybe someone would be kind. He walked up to a small food stall where a woman was grilling vegetables. She looked tired, but not unfriendly. He waited until she finished serving a customer, then stepped closer. "Hello," he said quietly. She looked at him, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Yes?" He nodded toward the small keyboard set up at the corner of her stand. It wasn't a full piano, just a little electric one with only half the keys. But it was still something. "Can I play that for a few minutes?" He asked. "If you want, I can help clean up your tables after, or I can play something for your customers." She raised an eyebrow. "You know how to play?" He nodded quickly. "Yes." She studied him a moment longer, then looked at the keyboard. "It's not very good. Some keys don't work." "That's okay," he said. "I don't mind." She sighed. "All right. 10 minutes. But if customers complain, you stop." The boy nodded gratefully. "Thank you." He moved to the small keyboard and sat down on the low stool beside it. He touched the keys lightly. Some felt sticky. One had a crack along the edge. A few made no sound at all, but he didn't complain. He pressed a chord gently. The sound was thin, tiny, almost like a toy. But it was still music. He started playing a simple tune, something light, something warm, something like the kind of morning his mother used to talk about when she told him to imagine sunshine. The sound was quiet, but a few passers-by turned to listen. The woman who owned the stand froze for a moment, surprised by how soft and peaceful the notes were. A young couple stopped eating for a second to watch him. A little kid stood on tiptoe, trying to see his fingers. Even a man carrying a stack of boxes slowed down as he passed. The boy felt a tiny spark inside him, a spark of something he had missed for a long time-hope. But as he kept playing, something else stirred inside him too, a memory. He remembered being on a bright stage when he was younger. He had worn a neat shirt that his mother ironed the night before. He had played a fast, joyful piece in a small local competition with dozens of parents in the audience. He remembered how nervous he had been, how his hands had shaken. But then he began playing, and everything else disappeared. The judges smiled. His mother cried. He won first place. He remembered how proud she looked when she hugged him afterward. The memory made his chest tighten. He kept playing anyway. Then the keyboard made a strange sputtering sound. The boy paused. He pressed another key, nothing. The screen flickered. The owner of the stall sighed loudly. "Ah, not this again," she muttered, tapping the side of the instrument. The keyboard went completely silent. The boy pulled his hands back, disappointed. The woman shook her head. "Sorry," she said. "Battery's dead. Guess that's enough for today." He nodded. "Thank you for letting me try." She handed him a small skewer with 2 vegetables on it. "Here," she said quietly. "Eat this. It's not much, but it's something." His heart jumped. He took it carefully. "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded once and went back to work. He ate the food slowly, savoring each bite. It wasn't much, but it helped. It felt like warmth spreading through him. He walked away from the stall, feeling a little stronger, a little more steady. But he knew he still needed more to get through the day. As he turned a corner, he saw a small crowd forming around another area of the market. People seemed excited about something, craning their necks and whispering. The boy hesitated, then walked closer. He didn't know it yet, but what he was about to see and what would happen next would change everything about his life. It would be the moment that connected his past to his future. It would be the moment his music finally reached the right ears. The boy walked toward the growing crowd, unsure of what was happening. People stood packed closely together, some standing on their toes, others leaning sideways to get a better look. There was a steady hum of excitement in the air, the kind that made people forget their errands and drift toward the noise. He moved slowly, gently slipping between people so he wouldn't bump into anyone. He wasn't trying to push to the front. He just wanted to see what everyone else found so interesting. As he got closer, he heard someone say, "He's really good. I didn't expect that." Someone else whispered, "Where did he learn to play like that?" The boy's heart jumped. Play? Did someone have a piano? His steps grew quicker. When he finally reached the front of the crowd, he saw it. An old wooden piano placed in the corner of a stall. The wood was polished, but scratched, the edges worn down from years of use. An older woman sat at a small table nearby, watching the performer with a proud smile. And there, sitting at the piano bench, was a young man playing a lively tune. He wasn't dressed fancy, just simple clothes, but he played with confidence. His hands moved fast, jumping across the keys in smooth, controlled motions. The boy watched with wide eyes. The crowd clapped along lightly. Some smiled at the performer, Some recorded with their phones. Others watched quietly as if they didn't want to miss a single note. For a moment, the boy forgot about his hunger. He forgot about the dead keyboard, the empty stalls, the rejections. All he could think about was the sound, the music, the way the piano seemed to breathe under the young man's hands. He stepped even closer. The young man finished with a bright final chord. The crowd burst into applause. A few people cheered. Someone shouted, "Play another one." The performer laughed softly and nodded. All right. One more." He cracked his knuckles dramatically, making a few people laugh. Then he lifted his hands and began another song, this one softer, calmer, more gentle. The boy listened closely. His fingers twitched slightly, as if remembering the shape of the keys. He loved the way the notes flowed together, one rising gently into the next. He could almost feel the music inside him. He knew if he touched that piano, even for a few seconds, something inside him would come alive again. But he stayed quiet. He didn't want to interrupt. And he didn't want anyone looking at him. Not yet. When the performer ended the second song, the audience applauded once more. A few people placed small coins into a metal bowl beside the piano. The young man thanked them warmly. The boy didn't have anything to give. He turned to leave, but then he heard someone say behind him, "He can play too." He froze. Slowly, he turned. A little girl, no older than 7, was pointing right at him. She had been sitting on the ground nearby, drawing something in a notebook. Now she stared at him with big, curious eyes. The boy blinked. "Me?" The girl nodded. "I saw you earlier at the other side of the market. You were playing the broken piano." The boy felt heat rush to his face. "It wasn't. I wasn't playing well." "Yes, you were," she insisted stubbornly. "It sounded pretty." People nearby looked at him now. The performer looked at him too, eyebrows raised. The boy wanted to disappear. He shook his head and began to step backward, hoping no one would pay more attention. But then the performer smiled kindly. "You play piano?" The boy hesitated, then nodded once. "You want to try?" The young man asked, scooting slightly off the bench to make space. The boy's heart raced. He looked at the piano, the polished wood, the wide set of keys, the solid bench. It had been so long since he played a real one. Not a broken one. Not a small keyboard. A real piano. His fingers tingled, but he shook his head weakly. No, I shouldn't." "Why not?" the performer asked gently. The boy swallowed. I don't want to bother people." The crowd chuckled softly, but not in a mean way. Someone said, "Go on, kid. Give it a try." Another voice added, "We'd love to hear you." The boy looked around nervously. Too many eyes. Too many people. "I can't," he whispered. The young performer stood up and placed a hand on the bench. "Come on, just one song. Doesn't matter how short." The boy stared at the bench. "Don't worry," the performer added. "No one here is going to laugh at you." But that was exactly the problem. He wasn't afraid of laughter. He was afraid of failing. He was afraid he wouldn't play as well as he used to. He was afraid the music had faded from him. His stomach twisted tightly. Suddenly, someone in the crowd said, "Maybe he doesn't really know how to play." Another voice laughed lightly. "Yeah, maybe he's just shy because he's bluffing." The boy's face went pale. He felt something cold crawl up his spine, a familiar feeling. The same one he felt when people assumed he couldn't do anything. The same one he felt when vendors brushed him away without listening. He clenched his hands. The young performer frowned. "Hey now," he said to the crowd. No need to tease him. But it was too late. The words had already sunk deep. The boy stepped forward before he could change his mind. "Can I really try?" he asked softly. The performer smiled again. "Of course. It's your turn." He stepped aside. The boy walked toward the bench slowly, almost like he was afraid it might vanish if he moved too quickly. He placed his backpack gently on the ground beside him. Then he sat down. The moment he sat, he felt a wave of memory rush through him, the weight of the bench, the smooth touch of the keys, the faint scent of polished wood. It all felt so familiar. He lifted his hands. Hovering them above the key's dot, his fingers shook. For a moment, he froze completely. What if he couldn't do it? What if the music didn't come? What if the crowd laughed? He closed his eyes. He remembered his mother's voice. "Promise me you'll keep playing." He let out a slow breath. Then he touched the keys. A gentle chord filled the air soft, but warm, like a whisper under sunlight. The crowd went quiet. He pressed another chord, then another, letting his fingers adjust. The piano responded beautifully. It didn't matter that he hadn't played a good instrument in months. His hands remembered. His heart remembered. He started with a slow melody, simple at first, letting the notes guide him. Each sound felt like a step forward, like waking up after a long, heavy sleep. Then, slowly, the melody grew. The boy played with a softness that made people lean forward. There was something gentle in the way he touched each key, careful, thoughtful, as if he respected every note. The performer watched with widened eyes. A few people in the crowd nudged each other, whispering things like, "Oh, wow, and he's actually good. And where did he learn that?" The boy didn't hear them. He was somewhere else entirely. He saw sunlight. He saw a warm apartment. He saw his mother smiling. His fingers moved faster, weaving notes together in a pattern that felt almost like breathing. He played from memory, not of a written song, but of a feeling, a mix of longing, sadness, and hope. People stared at him in awe. The music swelled, then softened again. The boy leaned slightly into the sound, letting his emotions sink into the keys. He forgot the market. He forgot the crowd. He forgot his hunger. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive. When he finally finished, he let the last note fade into the air like a sigh. The market was silent. Then the crowd burst into applause. The sudden noise startled him. He blinked, his hands still hovering over the keys. People clapped loudly, some cheering, some smiling with genuine admiration. A few even recorded the moment on their phones. The performer looked amazed. "That was incredible," he said. "You weren't kidding. You really can play." The boy felt his face warm. "Thank you," he whispered. Someone in the crowd called out, "Play another one." Another voice added, "Yes, do more." The boy looked at the crowd, stunned. They wanted more? But before he could decide, a group of teenagers pushed through the crowd. The boy recognized them instantly, the same teens who had mocked him earlier at the broken piano. They stopped at the front and stared at him. One of them scoffed. "You again?" Another said loudly, "So this is where you ran off to." The crowd grew restless. The boy swallowed hard. The teens looked at the piano, then at him. One smirked. "All right then. If you're so good, prove it. Play something real." The performer stepped forward, annoyed. "Hey," but the boy lifted a hand slightly, signaling him to stop. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want to argue. He just wanted to play. And maybe, for the first time, he wanted to prove to himself more than anyone that the music inside him hadn't disappeared. He placed his hands back on the keys. The crowd held its breath. What he played next would change everything. The market had never been this full, or at least that was how it felt to the young boy as he sat on the small wooden bench in front of the old piano. He could hear the noise around him rising and falling like waves. People were talking, laughing, calling out orders, and shuffling bags across the ground. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, warming the tops of the tents, and brightening the bright colors of fruit and vegetables. But even with all the usual sounds and movement, something felt different. It felt like the world had paused for a moment and was waiting to see what he would do. The boy's hands rested gently on the keys, but he hadn't played yet. His fingers hovered above them, trembling very slightly. He was hungry. His stomach hurt, and he could feel a kind of emptiness spreading through his body, making him light-headed. But that wasn't what frightened him the most. What frightened him was the crowd forming behind him. He didn't turn around, but he could sense their presence. People had stopped walking past. They were waiting, whispering quietly. Some were still making jokes, laughing as if they expected him to press a key and make a silly sound. A few of the older boys who had mocked him earlier were still nearby, leaning against a vendor table with smirks on their faces. The boy kept his eyes on the piano keys. They were chipped in places, and a few were slightly crooked. The paint had peeled off long ago, leaving the wood underneath exposed. Someone had once tried to clean it, but the dust and dirt had settled back in. The piano didn't look like much, but he knew that even the worst-looking instrument could still hold something beautiful inside. He had learned that from his mother. He took a slow breath in, feeling it fill his chest, and then let it out softly. He needed to calm himself. He needed to remember why he was here. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He wasn't here to win anything. He wasn't even here to prove the boys wrong, though their teasing still rang sharply in his ears. He was here because he needed to eat, and the only thing he had to offer was his music. His mother had told him many times, "When you have nothing left, you still have your gift." He pressed the first key. A soft note drifted out, fragile and gentle. It carried only a small distance before being swallowed by the noise of the market, but for him, it was enough. That first note always helped him find his place. His fear eased just a little. He pressed another note, then two more, and slowly a simple melody formed. The crowd quieted. The laughter died down. The market didn't go silent, but the sound shifted, like people were now listening without realizing it. A vendor who had been calling out prices stopped mid-sentence. A small child tugged on his mother's shirt, pointing toward the music. The boy closed his eyes. He let his fingers move on their own, finding the familiar patterns they had known since he was small. He didn't try to play something complicated yet. He wanted to warm up, to feel the piano's response. Each instrument had its own voice, its own way of breathing. Some pianos were stubborn. Some were too light. Some had keys that stuck. This one was old and tired, but there was still life in it. His melody began to grow stronger, more confident. It flowed like a small stream at first, then widened into something fuller. His fingers danced lightly over the keys, not rushing, not forcing, just letting the music come out naturally. He felt himself relax for the first time that day. When he opened his eyes again, the crowd behind him had grown larger. People stood shoulder to shoulder. Some held phones up, recording him. Others leaned forward as if they didn't want to miss a single sound. The boy swallowed, nervous for a brief moment, but then he gently shifted into a new section of the piece. It was richer, deeper, the kind of music he used to play at home when his mother would sit beside him and close her eyes, smiling softly. He remembered how she would place a hand on his shoulder and tell him that his music had warmth. She would say, "You play like you're telling a story." He wasn't sure if he was telling a story now, but he hoped someone could feel the meaning in it. The breeze shifted through the marketplace, carrying the sound a little further. A man who had been arranging fruit paused, hands in mid-air. A woman buying bread stopped counting her money. Even the vendor who had originally mocked the boy watched quietly, arms crossed but eyes fixed on the piano. The boy's fingers moved faster, sliding across the keys as he shifted into a brighter theme. His body swayed naturally, not in a showy way, but in the way musicians move when they feel the music guiding them. His hair fell slightly into his face, but he ignored it. He was lost in the world he was creating. The older boys who had teased him earlier stopped smiling. One of them let his arms drop for where he'd crossed them, staring with wide eyes. The other blinked, clearly confused by what he was hearing. It wasn't the clumsy, childish sound they had expected. It wasn't noise. It was something powerful and full of emotion. As the piece grew more intense, the boy could feel his heart beating faster. The piano shook slightly under his hands when he pressed the deeper keys. The sound grew, filling the space in front of him, wrapping around the people standing there. And then something unexpected happened. The crowd grew completely silent. The noise of the market didn't disappear. But the people who were listening to him stopped talking, stopped moving, stopped doing anything except watching him play. Even those farther away seemed to sense something important was happening. A man with a camera around his neck lowered it. A woman stepped closer, holding her breath. A child sat on the ground near the piano, legs crossed, eyes fixed on the boy's hands. The boy felt a strange sensation inside him, a mix of fear and hope. He wasn't used to so many people watching him at once. But he kept going. The music guided him forward. He shifted into a gentle part of the piece, letting the melody soften. He wanted to tell something through the music, something that words couldn't explain. He wanted people to feel the sadness he carried, the longing, the memories of the home he once had, and the love his mother had given him. A woman near the front wiped her eyes. She probably didn't know why she felt emotional, but the music had touched something in her. The boy wasn't sure how long he played. The world around him seemed to fade away. Time didn't matter. The hunger that had bothered him earlier floated somewhere far behind him. The only thing that mattered was the sound coming from the piano. When he finally reached the end of the piece, he let the last note ring out softly. It hung in the air for a moment, trembling, and disappeared. For a few seconds, everything was still. Then the crowd erupted. People clapped loudly, cheering and shouting. The noise broke through the boy's focus like a sudden burst of light. He blinked, startled. He wasn't used to applause. He wasn't used to people noticing him at all, much less celebrating him. A few people stepped forward. Some asked his name. Some tried to hand him coins or small bills. Someone placed a warm sandwich beside him on the bench. People were talking over each other, excited, surprised, confused. The boy sat there, overwhelmed. He didn't know what to do. He had only wanted a small meal. He had only wanted to survive the day. But now the crowd seemed to see something in him that he hadn't expected, something he wasn't sure he believed in himself. He lowered his eyes. Feeling shy and unsure, then a quiet voice spoke from the front of the crowd. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The boy looked up. A woman stood there, watching him with calm, thoughtful eyes. She didn't look surprised like the others. She didn't look amused or confused. She looked like she understood the music he had just played. The crowd fell silent again as she stepped closer. The boy didn't know it yet. But this moment would change everything. It was the start of a new chapter he had never imagined. The crowd that had gathered around the old piano was still buzzing with excitement, but their voices softened as the woman stepped a little closer to the boy. Her presence seemed to calm the air around her. She wasn't holding up a phone to record him. She wasn't cheering loudly like everyone else. She simply stood there, her eyes focused on him with a quiet understanding that made the boy's heart beat faster. She repeated her question gently. "Where did you learn to play like that?" The boy opened his mouth to speak, but found himself unsure of what to say. He wasn't used to people asking about his past. He wasn't used to people caring. For a moment, he looked down at his hands, still resting on the worn piano keys, as if searching for the answer there. I just learned," he finally said in a soft voice. At home. A long time ago. The woman nodded slowly, as if she understood there was more to the story, but didn't want to press him in front of the crowd. Her expression stayed warm and calm. She didn't offer pity, only interest. What you played wasn't something a child learns on their own, she said gently. You have skill. Real skill. Do you know that? The boy shook his head quickly. He didn't like attention. He felt the eyes of the crowd on him, and it made him want to shrink into the piano bench. But the woman only smiled a little. You should know. You played beautifully. Her voice had weight, not loud, but steady. A few people in the crowd murmured in agreement. The boy didn't know how to answer. Compliments made him nervous. Praise was something he hadn't heard in a very long time, not since his mother used to listen to him play at home. The woman glanced at the sandwich, sitting beside him, and then reached into her bag. She took out a small box with a meal inside and placed it gently on the piano next to the sandwich. You should eat, she said kindly. After playing like that, you must be tired. The boy stared at the food, then at her. For a moment he didn't move, unsure if he should accept it. But she gave him a small nod, as if encouraging him. Slowly, he reached out and pulled the box closer. His stomach tightened with hunger, and the smell of the food filled his senses. He wanted to eat right away, but he waited. He didn't want to appear rude. The woman looked at the piano, then back at him. Do you mind if I sit? The boy shook his head. She sat on a small crate near the bench, still giving him space. The crowd began to thin a little. Some people stayed nearby, still curious, but many walked away, talking about what they had just witnessed. A few people waved or thanked him for playing. One older man clapped him lightly on the shoulder before leaving. When the noise died down, the woman spoke again. I'm visiting the town for a short time, she said. I came to the market looking for something simple, fresh fruit, maybe some bread. I didn't expect to find someone with your talent. The boy looked down at his hands again. Thank you, he whispered. You're welcome. She paused. What's your name? He hesitated before answering. He rarely shared his name, but for some reason he felt safe in that moment. Eli, she nodded. It suits you. She didn't give her name right away, and Eli didn't ask. He was too shy to. He opened the meal box, and the warmth inside hit his face gently. It smelled like rice and vegetables simple, but to him it felt like a feast. He took a small bite as he ate. The woman watched him without judgment. Eli, she said after a moment, I've worked with many young musicians. I've taught some, helped others find training, but very few have what you have. You didn't just play notes. You told a story. He paused mid-bite. He didn't know if he believed her. He didn't even know if he was supposed to respond. She continued, I've been in music for many years, and I can tell when someone has a true gift. The crowd had gone quiet enough that her words felt close and gentle, not overwhelming. Eli lowered his eyes again. I just played what I remembered, he said. Pieces my mother taught me, and some I made up. She taught you well, the woman replied softly, and you learned even more on your own. Eli didn't speak. He didn't want to think about his mother too deeply. It still hurt too much. But he appreciated that the woman spoke of her with respect and not pity. She took a slow breath. Eli, do you have someone looking after you? His hand paused. He shook his head once, slowly. The woman wasn't surprised. She had sensed it already, but she didn't respond in a dramatic way. She kept her voice gentle and steady. I see. Eli waited, expecting a lecture or unwanted questions. But instead she said, I want to help you. If you'll let me. His eyes lifted again, confused. Help? How? She reached into her bag and pulled out a small card. It wasn't flashy, just simple white paper with neat writing. She placed it on the piano. "This is the music foundation I work with," she said. "We help young musicians who need support housing, lessons, instruments, anything they need to grow." Eli stared at the card without touching it. It looked important. "Too important. They won't just take anyone," she continued. "But I believe they'll take you. If you play for them like you played today, I'm certain of it." Eli swallowed, unsure if he understood everything she was saying. "Why? Why me?" "Because you deserve a chance," she said simply. "Everyone deserves a chance, especially someone who fights this hard to keep their gift alive." Eli looked at the piano again. He wasn't sure he deserved anything. He had lost so much already. But something in her voice made him feel a small bit of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. She stood up slowly. "I can take you to meet them this week, but only if you want to go. I won't force you." Eli looked down at the food in his hands. He felt the weight of the decision settle inside him. The idea of playing for strangers, of going somewhere new, scared him. But the idea of staying in the same struggle forever scared him even more. "What if they don't like me?" he asked quietly. She smiled gently. "Then we try again somewhere else. But I think they will like you." The simplicity of her confidence warmed something inside him. She turned to leave, but then stopped. "My name is Lena," she said. "If you decide you want help, come to the address on the card. I'll be waiting." Eli nodded slowly. "Thank you, Lena." She gave him one last warm smile before walking away. Disappearing into the crowd, Eli sat alone on the piano bench for a long time after she left. The meal was warm in his hands. The card sat quietly on the piano, almost glowing in the sunlight. People who walked by still whispered about him, about the boy who played like a professional, about how no one expected it, about how amazing it had been. Eli didn't pay attention to their words. He looked at the piano, then at the card. For the first time in a long time, he felt something familiar, a small spark inside his chest, that hope that he took another slow bite of his meal. Replaying the woman's words in his mind, "You deserve a chance." He let those words settle into his heart. And even though the path ahead scared him, he knew he couldn't stay where he was forever. Something had changed, something big. This moment, the moment someone truly saw him, was the beginning of a new door opening. And deep inside, Eli felt ready to walk toward it. Eli sat on the old piano bench long after the last of the crowd had gone. The market had returned to its usual rhythm. Vendors called out prices again. Children ran between the stalls. People walked with bags and baskets swinging at their sides. But even with all the noise, Eli felt as though he were sitting inside a quiet bubble. The world moved around him, but his mind stayed still. He looked down at the small card resting on the piano. The sunlight hit it at an angle that made the letters shine faintly. He traced the edges with his finger, nervous and unsure. The words on it felt heavy, almost too big for someone like him. He wasn't used to choices. Most of his life lately had been survival, not decisions. But now he had one. He could walk away, pretend this moment never happened, pretend the woman named Lena never stopped to listen. He could keep wandering the streets, keep searching for food, keep sleeping wherever he found space. It was familiar, even if it was painful. Or he could follow the address on the card. He could try. The thought made his heart tremble in his chest. He picked up the sandwich someone had left for him and took a small bite. It helped calm him a little. When he finished eating what he could, he stood up from the bench. His legs stiff from sitting so long, he placed the card carefully inside his pocket, close to his chest, as if it were something fragile. Then he took a slow breath, and he walked. The next morning came with soft sunlight and a cool breeze. Eli woke up in the small spot where he had slept the night before, curled up against the side of a building that offered a bit of shelter. His stomach felt tighter than usual. He wasn't sure if it was hunger or nerves. He pulled the card from his pocket and stared at it again. The address was written neatly, not far from where he was. He decided he would go. If not today, then when? He didn't want fear to lock him in place. He cleaned himself as best as he could at a nearby public sink. He combed his fingers through his hair. He didn't look like someone important, but he wanted at least to look presentable. With slow steps, he followed the directions. The building he reached wasn't huge or fancy like he imagined. It was simple and clean, with wide windows and a sign that read Music Learning Center. There were pictures taped inside the windows of children holding instruments. Smiling. Eli stood outside for a long time. Gripping the card in his hand, he almost turned around, but he remembered Lena's steady voice. Asterisk, you deserve a chance. Asterisk, so he stepped inside. The air inside the building was warm and filled with a faint sound of instruments, playing somewhere in the distance. Not loudly, just gentle notes floating through the halls. A woman at the front desk looked up and smiled kindly. Hello there. Can I help you? Eli struggled with the words, but managed to hold out the card. The woman's smile brightened with recognition. Ah, you're the boy Lena told us about. She said you might come today. Hearing someone talk about him so openly made Eli's heart pound. Is she here? He asked softly. She's in one of the practice rooms. I'll take you to her. Eli followed her down a wide hallway. The walls were painted with calming colors, soft blues and greens. He heard the sound of a violin coming from one room, a guitar from another. Every sound added to the warm atmosphere. When the woman stopped outside a door and knocked, Eli felt his palms grow sweaty. Lena opened the door with her usual calm smile. You came, she said gently. Eli nodded. I'm glad. She stepped aside and motioned for him to enter. The room had a clean piano in the corner, looking nothing like the chipped one at the market. This one had polished keys that almost shone under the ceiling lights. Lena sat on a chair while Eli stood in the center of the room, unsure of what to do. I'm not going to rush you, she said. Take your time. Eli looked at the piano again, drawn to it like a magnet. He walked toward it slowly, almost afraid to touch it. When he pressed one key, the sound was warm, clear, and full. He took a seat, and without thinking, he began to play. He started with a simple tune, something familiar and comforting. Once again, his fingers moved as if they remembered the path better than his mind did. Lena listened quietly, her expression thoughtful and full of admiration. Then Eli shifted into something stronger, something deeper. A piece he had created on his own during nights when sadness felt too heavy. The notes poured out of him like water breaking through a dam. He didn't notice Lena wipe a tear from her eye. When he finished, he looked up shyly. I'm sorry, he said. If it wasn't good, it was more than good, Lena said, standing. Eli, you have something special, something rare. He swallowed, unsure what to do with words like that. Lena continued. The foundation has a process. Usually there are interviews, paperwork, auditions. But after hearing you play yesterday and today, I spoke with them. They agreed to let you audition immediately. Eli's heart felt like it stopped. Today? Yes, she said gently. Only if you want to. He hesitated, but then he nodded. He didn't want to run away from opportunity anymore. Lena led him to a larger room with a grand piano at the center. 3 people sat behind a long table. They looked important, but not harsh. They smiled as he entered. One of them spoke softly. We've heard about you. We're excited to listen. Lena gave him an encouraging nod. Eli sat at the grand piano. It felt even smoother than the one in the practice room. His hands shook for a moment, but then he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He began to play. He poured everything he had into the music, his memories, his loss, his hunger, his longing, his hope. Every note was honest. Every melody was a piece of his heart. When he finished, the room stayed silent for a moment. Then one of the judges spoke. "Eli, that was extraordinary." Another leaned forward. "Where did you learn to play like that?" He answered quietly, "My mother taught me when I was small." All three judges exchanged a look, then smiled. The one in the center said, "We would like to offer you a place here. Full scholarship, housing, meals, everything you need." Eli stared at them, not trusting his ears. "All of it?" "Yes," they said together. Lena placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did it." And for the first time in a long time, Eli felt tears fall, not from pain, not from hunger, but from relief. The weeks that followed changed everything. Eli moved into a small but comfortable room at the Foundation's housing building. He received new clothes, clean sheets, and warm meals every day. For the first time since losing his mother, he slept in a real bed. He attended daily music lessons, practiced for hours, and met other young musicians. Some were shy like him, others confident, but all were kind. Lena became a steady presence in his life. She helped him with schoolwork, checked on him often, and encouraged him to keep growing. Every evening, Eli practiced on a piano that felt like it was made just for him. Every note he played made him feel closer to the future he never thought he'd have. Months later, the Foundation held a large concert. Family members, teachers, supporters, and many visitors gathered to watch the young musicians perform. Eli stood backstage, heart racing, dressed in clean formal clothes the Foundation had given him. Lena adjusted the sleeve of his shirt gently. "You're ready," she whispered. Eli nodded, though he still felt nervous. But when he stepped onto the stage and saw the grand piano waiting for him under the soft lights, something inside him felt right. He sat down. The hall was silent. He took a slow breath and began to play. His music filled the room, warm and full and bright. It carried his whole journey, the hunger, the pain, the hope, the chance he had been given. People in the audience leaned forward, eyes wide. Some smiled. Some grew emotional. When the final note faded, the hall broke into applause. Eli stood, cheeks warm, heart full. He looked toward the wings of the stage where Lena stood, clapping proudly. This moment felt like a promise. Promise that he would never have to play for food again. He would play for joy. For hope, for his mother, for himself. And as the applause continued, Eli knew something with absolute certainty. His life had truly begun. The air felt different the next morning, almost as if the world itself was gently nudging everyone forward, telling them it was time to face things they had been avoiding for far too long. The town was still quiet, the streets not yet filled with the usual movement, but inside the house there was a quiet shift. No one said anything right away, but it was clear something was settling inside each of them. The day before had left everyone thinking about promises, about worries, about moments they wished they could rewind or erase, and about the people around them who might have carried more weight than anyone realized. And even though the house wasn't large or fancy, something about it felt warm that morning, like it had gathered all their thoughts and wrapped them up so they wouldn't spill everywhere all at once. It started in the kitchen, as it always did. Someone opened a window, letting in the soft breeze that carried the smell of early morning. The sun hadn't fully risen, but a soft, pale light spread across the counter. There was the familiar sound of water filling the kettle, the small clink of mugs being moved, and the calm rhythm of someone pacing slightly, waiting for everyone else to walk in. When they all finally gathered, They didn't jump into heavy conversation. Instead, there was a slow, careful flow of small talk, the kind that helps people warm up before getting into deeper things. They talked about the breeze coming through the door, the sound of birds outside, and how the day ahead might be a good one. But beneath those gentle words, EAC,